Hey, beer appreciators! Swadee krab. Welcome to Beer Times Story, the platform where beer and brewing knowledge is shared. Okay, for today's session, we're going to have a good burp about cracking the code of New Zealand hops enigmatic attributes topic. Yes, this is time to talk about hops, one of the main four beer brewing ingredients which imparts, characterful aroma and flavor in various styles of beer that we all love. Speaking of hops and where to find them, it is a plant that grows well in the cool and dry environment with hefty amount of daytimes, say like 15 hours plus. And in general, these conditions can be found between like the 35th to 55th parallels on both sides of the equator, as you can see on the photo I pull up on the screen, right? Now, it is not to be surprised that the major hop growing regions come from this area, like the Pacific Northwest in the USA, or the East Kent in the UK, the Hallertau region in Germany, or Sartek in Czech Republic. Now, in the past couple of years, there are a handful of hop cultivars from one particular area in the southern hemisphere that has been gaining a lot of popularity and attention from both the brewing world and the beer consuming world. I find that the momentum of its impact on how these hops impart such an enigmatic aroma and flavor to the beer is unstoppable. That region is New Zealand, and today we will try to crack the code to find out what contributes to the emergence of such unique and characterful hops from this region. But before that, let me introduce the person who will guide all of us down today's tour first. Okay? In 1971, as a fresh agricultural science graduate student from Massey University in New Zealand, he joined the Department of Scientific and Industrial Research as a plant breeder and started working in tobacco field, which was a thing back then. A decade later, in 1982, he stepped his game in science of plant breeding by getting himself a doctoral degree in agronomy and crop science, focused on plant breeding and genetics from North Carolina State University in the US. At this point in time, his life as a plant breeder and plant breeding scientist still revolved around the world of tobacco. Now, the interesting things begins here. At the end of his doctoral degree back home in New Zealand, there was a call for hop breeder position from the government as the person in charge of the program at that time was about to retire and tobacco industry was declining, in which he said yes. He then came back home, started working as a hop breeder, took over the hop research program since 1984, and spent the next 38 years in the hop world until his retirement in 2021. Throughout his career, he has been working in research, development, and release of 16 specialty hop cultivars, including Nelson Sauvin, Riwaka, Motueka, Nectaron, and Superdelic. Actually, his retirement does not end his journey in the hops world at all. In 2022, he joined the NZ Hops and became their brand ambassador, which he happily holds this role until today. So please welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Ron Beatson.
Kia ora, everybody. Happy to join you all, and hopefully this will be a fairly relaxed and enjoyable session for everybody concerned. And I hope you can gain some knowledge about our hop program in New Zealand that we've been happily working on for many generations now.
Yeah, kia ora, Dr. Ron, and thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on our platform.
Pleasure to be here.
Right. So how are you doing?
Oh, pretty good. It's midwinter, of course, in New Zealand at the moment, and it's a bit of a grey old day outside. Usually we get lots of sunshine, but today it's a bit grey and looks like it's going to rain a bit later on. We've actually had one of the driest summers on record here in New Zealand, or particularly around the Nelson area where the hops are grown, and right. They blame it on El Nino and weather. Climate change, but I'm not too sure why. But anyway, we've had a very dry 6 months or so, and that's impacted the hops. So in some ways good, and in other ways it's being a bit too dry. It's quite difficult to manage the crop. Of course, we have to irrigate. So
Right.
yes,
And as I understand that, at this time, the hop fields are kind of quieted at the moment, right? Because the hop harvest just passed March and April.
correct. Yeah. It's nothing much is happening out there. It's the fields are rather barren looking,
Empty, yeah.
no sign of life. But
No sign.
apart from sheep that are grazing on the pastures and things, and where the plants are, so that's about all the activity you'll see out there at the moment. And they do a lot of obviously winter maintenance on the hops
Right.
at this time of year. So there are tractors going up and down, putting adjusting the pH of the soil, and also doing other things, maintenance work on the posts and wires and things like that as well.
Gotcha. And the activities of that going on the hop field in the southern hemisphere was like 4 to 5 months ahead of those in the northern hemisphere, right? About that.
Correct. Yeah. The main harvest in the Pacific Northwest is almost exactly opposite ours, maybe a little bit earlier. They start in the last week, and it's about the same time actually, because they start in late August over there and go on to the most of September. Whereas ours, we're sort of from about mid-February onwards to the end of March. Our season tends to be a little bit longer, mainly because we've got quite an array of cultivars that we mature at different times. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. Gotcha. And I have to say it again. Nice sweater, by the way. I really like it.
Bit of free advertising here. It's as you can see, it's I make, although I'm sitting inside, I haven't got the heater on today, so it's quite nice and comfortable. So I'll keep it on for the duration of this talk anyway.
That's awesome. This is just out of my curiosity. Like, about your role as the brand ambassador at NZ Hops. Like, what do you actually do there? Like, what's your days look like?
Well, it's a very part-time role. When I finished at Plant and Food Research, my science role as a plant breeder in hops, so I finished that at the end of 2021, as you indicated in your introduction. And pretty much straight away, the industry were making noises about wanting more information about, the link between research, if you like, and growing hops. It's a very important important link. And so they came calling at pretty early on in 2022, and by about this time, 22, I started working part time. It's only a part time role. I do 20 hours a month. That's all I'm doing, and I jokingly say it's a flag waving exercise. So I'm here to advertise this company and all the good products that we produce in the hop world, which I'm very, very proud of. That I've seen both ends of it. Of course, I've been involved in the development of it with my team at Plant and Food Research, and also right through to the rollout into the commercial field and helping the marketing and sales people with their knowledge in terms of the chemistry and the other attributes of the hops, and so generally background stuff. So part of the work is I'm involved in a lot of collaboration brewing trials. So I've just come back from the United States, where we did several
great breweries, right?
We did, I don't know how many breweries we toured, but we're in Colorado, and several breweries there, and also down into Southern California. We worked our way up from San Diego up to Los Angeles, and there's some really notable breweries there we teamed up with, and so that's the sort of thing I've been doing. I've done 2 or 3 lab collabs in New Zealand and Australia as well. So that's part of the role, is sort of doing the ceremonial pouring in of the hops into the kettle and getting the photo shoots, and it's very important. And they like to have me around because I guess because of my experience and knowledge around hops. So and I must say that I've in both Australia, New Zealand, and also up in the USA, they're wonderful people to deal with, and they're so enthusiastic about beer. So it's been an easy job for me to fill in there. I don't feel like I have to wave the flag too vigorously, because they know a lot about our hops anyway. So
Yeah.
But yeah, no, but I've loved the role, and I'm getting on a bit, but I'll hang around for a little bit longer yet.
That's cool. I mean, it sounds like an awesome job for you, like fit you well, make you
Yeah,
happy. That's
I mean, a lot of people say, God, fancy being paid to go around the globe and drink beer. In fact, I'm next week. I'm off to the UK on a private visit, but I'm taking time out to go and do a collab with one of the main breweries down in Cornwall called Verdant Brewery,
okay.
and
Yeah.
so they've had an association with New Zealand hops and been out here to New Zealand before. So I'm going to be doing a collab beer with them. So that'll be fun.
That's cool. That's cool. I just look forward for like the photo shoot from that side. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, I'll make sure I take some then.
Sure. That's awesome, Dr. Ron. So before we move to today's topic, I like to touch a bit about the main hops growing region in New Zealand first. So
Yeah.
let me pull the photo up, and we will go from there. Yeah, so if I understand correctly, so New Zealand has like two islands, right? The one on the north and the other.
Main islands. Yeah, main islands. Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Which
Yes, correct.
one is main one again?
Well, there's two main islands. There's the North Island and the South Island. That's the English names for them. The name for the South Island is where the hop industry is based, is Te Waipounamu. So it's that means mountains and the South Island, and it's the area where the hops are grown is the top end of the South Island. So so it's in an area called Nelson, and that's the province, and Tasman is the wider district, if you like. So Nelson is the city, and the district immediately around it, and the hop growing area is based in there. It's a well sheltered area. It's quite a important horticultural area in New Zealand. It's, I guess, our climate, you could say it is temperate oceanic, so it's mild climate. We don't get any super cold weather in the winter time, and we don't get any super hot weather in the summer. And it's sort of like it's a fairly flat, if you like. The difference between the winter and the summer temperatures are not huge, not like some other countries. It's not a continental climate. It's, as I said, it's temperate oceanic. So we're surrounded by a lot of ocean, so that affects our weather quite dramatically. And we've got a mountain range down the spine of the South Island. We sit astride the two continental plates, the Australian plate and the Pacific plate, and so we're quite earthquake-prone country, a bit like Japan and other areas around the Pacific Rim. So that we live with it basically. So it's and so the area, as I said, that's the main hop growing area. Hops have been grown in New Zealand since the 1840s. So it's had quite a long time, and it's I guess it's no it's no fluke that it ends up being in Nelson, because it's the sunniest place in New Zealand. And it's as I said, it's sheltered very well from the mountain range down the center of the South Island. Protects the Nelson area, which is, as I said, all the prevailing weather patterns are from the southwest mainly, and so coming across from southern Australia across to New Zealand, and so when they hit the Alps, it gets deflected, and so the Nelson area is well protected from most rain events, if you like, or bad weather events, and we don't get any dramatic storms that affect some other areas of New Zealand, particularly some of the North Island areas, and the east coast of the North Island gets hammered by quite bad winds and rain events. So so that's the basics of it. Our latitude is 41, 42. That's where the hops are grown. 41, 42 south, which is from your previous diagram, Narp, that's sort of in the zone, if you like, of where hops can happily grow. Right. So New Zealand, you can grow hops most areas of New Zealand, but almost exclusively the almost the total area of hops produced in New Zealand is from the Nelson Tasman area, the area up on the screen here. So that's, so we get lots of sunshine, about 2,500 hours of sunshine. We have one thing that's has puzzled people is why we've got some unique flavors and things, and I think it's partly due to the fact that we've got a relatively high UV compared with most other countries that grow hops, and that's, I think, is affecting the chemistry. It's obviously UV plants protect themselves against the UV by changing their biochemical pathways and producing more of certain compounds. So I think that's part of the reason why our hops are a bit unique. And as I said, 2,500 hours of sunshine is a reasonably good dollop of sunshine, and we get fairly even rainfall. We got where we are in Motueka, the rainfall here is around 1,400 millimeters per year, and it's pretty much evenly spread right throughout the year. So roughly about 100 millimeters a year, give or take a bit. This year has been a bit less, of course, but normally we get around about that amount. So the other uniqueness about the New Zealand is that, or New Zealand production for hops, is that we don't have any major pests and diseases. Because we're in a very isolated area, we, no land mass really anywhere near any closer than Australia to us, which is good for us. And we don't have any pest and diseases to speak of. There's only one that causes any kind of economic problems in New Zealand, and that's a two-spotted mite, which is pretty common right throughout the world of hop growing. But because of our mild climate, we don't have massive amounts of two-spotted mite in normal seasons, and we've developed over the last 25, 30 years a means of biological control of it. So we don't put any sprays on our plants for the two-spotted mite.
Predator, right?
Yeah, correct. Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's another mite actually. That's the predator, and it's that does the job pretty well, and it's monitored very closely. If there's a really bad outbreak and things get out of hand, or the growers don't keep on top of the monitoring, they will have to spray. But it's very rare for people to actually have to get around to spraying. So the soil types here are alluvial silt soils in general. There's some heavier clay type soils, fairly ancient clay soils, but but in general they're fairly free draining. So that's another requirement of hops. You nice mild climate, not too much wind, reasonably good rainfall throughout the season, which is helpful. And as I said, the soil types are free draining soils. So that's pretty much, I think, one thing. The other thing about the Nelson area is that we do have, it's in general, we get fairly good winter chill. Because of our clear skies here, we get reasonably good frosts on the ground. Like we've already had quite a few frosts this year, leading into the middle of winter here now. And so you need that winter chill to give the dormancy to the hop plant, or proper dormancy. So that's helpful for the hops. But as I said, there's a lot of things. We're in the right latitudes. We're at the ideal climate, and we do get winter chill to help the plants go dormant, which is quite a good thing for the hops. So that's pretty much sums up the environmental conditions, I guess, if you like, of what we've done here.
Of course, you have there. Sorry,
Of course, one other thing I should say, Pat, is that hops are not native of New Zealand. So all the hops that are grown here have, at one time or another, have been imported into New Zealand, and we've used those stock plants, if you like, to do our breeding work. So that's been developed over the last since the Second World War. But anyway, we can talk about that in a bit later on in the discussion.
Sure. And thanks for giving the brief overview of the Nelson area. And Dr. Ron, I find when I look at this map the first time when I saw it, and I zoom in and I start reading all the names, and it started ringing the bells for me, like, okay, this is Nelson, and then you have the area called Motueka, you have the area called Rivaga, Monterey and Wyoming. I was like, oh, there's all the names of the hops, and it's from the location of area around this Nelson, and it's just kind of a great.
Brings it home. Yeah, yeah. I like. Yeah, we've tended to use. We've actually used Maori names mainly for the hops that we've developed here, and that's been by mutual consent with the researchers and the hop industry itself, giving them names that would sort of identify them. But we've, as you know, with the two latest ones, we've moved away from the names. One of the reasons, of course, we're running out of really good names to pronounce. So it's
that's acceptable.
Yeah. So obviously Nelson Sauvin came about. It was pretty obvious where that came from.
Right.
But some of the other ones, anyway, we can talk about those a bit more. But yes, you're right. It's identifying the area, which I think is important for us. We've Riwaka and Motueka, of course, were the main hop areas historically, and the hops have moved further inland as time goes on.
Right. So I mean, like at the current time, which area that has the largest amount of hop field in Nelson area?
Well, that's an interesting point there, Pat. It's moved away really from the Motueka Riwaka areas. They're very high-priced flatland area right around the mouth of the Motueka River, which is the main river in the Nelson province. And the main area growing hops now is in the Tapawera area, which is it's about right at about 9 o'clock on that screen there, further to the left of where Upper Moutere is, and it's in the Motueka Valley, and you can just see it at the top there, where the Motueka River is there, and it's even further out to the left from there. So that's all right. That's a good picture that you got there. It has the contours, which I think is really good. This diagram.
Thank you.
So, but the Upper Moutere area is one area that's traditionally grown hops. Right from the early settlers came into that area. A lot of German settlers actually came into the area and started growing hops in that area. So the Moutere, between Upper Moutere and Motueka, there's quite a lot of there's a lot of hops grown in that area. And also, as I said, up the valley, up the Motueka Valley, further up to the left off the screen, if you like, is where the main hop growing areas, and the Tapawera area will be growing probably, let me guess, probably about 40% of the hops that are grown. And the rest of it, there's about 10% in the Moutere area and about 15-20% in the Riwaka Motueka area, and some over in the Waimeas as well. That's down the bottom of the screen from that diagram there. So, yeah, so there's four main areas. What we call the Motueka Riwaka area. There's the Motueka Valley Tapawera area is the main one. There's the Moutere area, and the fourth one is the Waimeas. So that's down, where you've got the plains there. That's about where the hops are grown. Yeah.
Right. Gotcha. I mean, it's just awesome, to know the regions where it's produces characterful hops, and I think it is a good ribbon cutter to dive down to today's topic.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Ron, you set foot in hop breeding in about like 1984, in which I would imagine that it would probably be like vastly different when you look from today's perspective. Projected back to that time. So the question is, like, what was the landscape of hop breeding or hop growing scene in New Zealand look like in your early days?
Yeah, well, I could just delve briefly back to my predecessors. The program started in the late 1940s, early 1950s, to give you an idea, just straight after the Second World War. And I can go into the reasons for why it started up. It was mainly to look at, there was a root rot disease in the soils here, sort of prior to that affected the hops. It was obviously in the soils here, and that was called black root rot. It was a Phytophthora soil-borne fungus disease, and that affected the hops that were grown back in the 1800s and also the early 1900s up to the Second World War. And basically the program was started up to resolve the issue of the root rot, and the material that was grown and imported into New Zealand was basically from Europe, with some of our pioneering people that came out to New Zealand brought their hops with them, their favourite hops for making beers. And as I said, the beer production was all over New Zealand at that stage.
Right.
And as I said, it quickly became evident that Nelson was a pretty good spot for commercial production of hops. And one of the around about the turn of the 20th century, into the 20th century, was a hop called Californian Lake Cluster, and that was imported into New Zealand from northern California, an area called the Russian River Valley, and same name as the brewery up there, I guess. Very famous brewery, and I've had many a conversation with the owners, and been up there and myself and done some brewing with them, and we call it Cali. It's Californian Lake Cluster. It's quite a mouthful, so we shortened it to Cali. And Cali was the main hop that was grown in New Zealand up until the breeding program started, pretty much in the late 1940s. And the main reason why Cali was so popular was that it was well adapted to our climate. If you look at the latitudes of Russian River Valley, it's about the same as Nelson, and pretty close to it. And so hops are very latitude sensitive. So it seemed to be well adapted. But while it was a good yielder and produced some nice hops, etc., it was susceptible to this root rot disease. So that was the main issue with it. And so the program was started up by they've noted that some of the older hops that came from Europe had good resistance to the disease, but were poor yielders. So the opposite, So what they did was they crossed the Cali with some of these European stock material, and came up with a good resistance from. So that's where the breeding program started in the 1940s, early 50s, and there was an immediate success. There's a lot of hybrid vigor there. The plants were well adapted. The resulting crosses. It was done by Dr. Rudy Roberg was the breeder at that stage, and so things took off, and so it was a cottage industry. You'd say that back then, the 1940s, early 50s, and when I say cottage industry, it's basically just producing hops for New Zealand. Very little of anything else, but for New Zealand. A little bit was exported to Australia and also to the UK, but not much to speak of.
Yeah.
So it developed as a cottage industry. And these new cultivars quickly took hold, and the area expanded. And also at that stage, we started doing some work on what we call triploid, which we could talk about in a few minutes. But so basically, I arrived, and the triploid program was well underway by then. So that was started in the early 1960s. And I arrived in the early 1980s. So, there was three cultivars were released by the time I got into the program. So the landscape, I guess you could say, was at the turning point, really. I was fortuitous that I arrived and started working on hops. And, it was the industry was developing a reasonably good export industry at that stage too. You'll recall that there was a nuclear disaster in what is now Ukraine, the Chernobyl disaster, and that affected production worldwide, and there was some thoughts of radioactive hops being all around the place. So whether it eventuated, I don't know. I can't remember now, but basically they were looking at other options of what other countries could grow hops that weren't radioactive, if you like.
Right, and I just spot on New Zealand.
Yeah, and so look at somewhere on the globe, that was furthest away from Chernobyl, and that's us pretty much. Right. So that's being a bit lighthearted about it, but it's that's really where the industry took off. It was we had some contracts with some brewing people in Europe mainly, and also some into North America and into Japan, and So the industry, as I said, when I took over, was really, we had high alpha cultivars, so ones that are sort of 12% plus, if you like, in their alpha acids, and that was the main reason. As you can, if you wind the clock back, that was pretty much what hops were used for. It's just for bittering more than anything else, with the odd hop used in lagers for for their aromatic properties, more, in other words, used a bit later in the brewing process. So that was when I arrived. That's what the industry looked like. It was transitioning, if you like, from a cottage industry into an export-dominated industry. Today, it's that's what it is. We're exporting most of our hops. About 85-90% of our hops are exported now, and they're going into high-priced areas around the world, mainly into, well, some into the UK, Europe, and also North America, and also Japan and Australia. Well, it's not used in New Zealand, that is, as well. So so that's the nutshell what the program looked like. It was pretty small. It was I wondered whether I'd chosen the right career to be or right crop to be furthering my career in plant breeding. But as it turned out, it was I was in the plant breeding is a long-term game anyway. You have to play the long game. So I was quite happy. I knew what it was like to wait around a long time to produce cultivars. So it is a long-term project. You 10 plus years before you can produce a cultivar from scratch, usually. Anyway,
gotcha. I mean, but it's looked like a fun scene to work at. I mean, it's fun and challenge back then, and working things from the ground up pretty much, and see how the industry is kind of a change is kind of a interesting thing. And from the story that you share, I also find that it is amazing to see how I would say researchers back then come up with a way to counteract with the problem that they face, like the black root disease and the use of the Cali cluster from Russian River Valley, and kind of breed them with the disease-resistant cultivar from Europe, right? And just make
correct.
sure that the plant itself gonna grown well in New Zealand land or soil.
Yes. Yes, it's sort of like it's a home away from home for the hops. It is a good climate for growing hops, that's for sure. And I think we've proven that. We've got the quality of the hops that are coming out of New Zealand are sort of second to none, I would say. So we're very pleased with the way it's developed. One thing that I guess the scene that I did strike when I first came back was that the program needed an injection of the capital. We had very limited. The research program was quite small, and it also had limited drying facilities, and the processing plant wasn't all that good in terms of the hop extraction off the plant, if you like, picking the plants. So a lot of the emphasis that I put into the program at that time was really infrastructure developments, new kilns and new hop picking machine, and also getting a bit more electronically inclined with their program too. Of course, it was sort of about the generation of the the
computers,
the little toy things you could take out in the field and record notes. So that was all happening at that time and a bit later. So I put a lot of emphasis on that in the program. And so, we've taken it on further since then, of course. We've now got a pilot brewing plant in the research program, and we're fully electronic, of course. We've got machines like most industries now. You can take iPads out into the field and record notes, and it's uploaded directly to a database, which is instantly available, and everything's available these days, isn't it?
High tech stuff. That's all good.
Yeah. So it's been fun to see all that development, and it's continuing on, of course, as well. We're getting more and more into molecular genetics now as well in the breeding program, so that's part of it. But we can talk about that if time permits.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, I believe that the attempt of you and also the predecessor before you that set up this hop research program, kind of establish a solid foundations, for hop development, breeding, and planting in New Zealand. I found one set of photos of the early days of the hop research station in Rwanda, and let's have a look together.
Sure. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that are you familiar with this site on the left?
Oh,
But
yes.
I know it's way ahead before your time. But like, is that the station that you
Yep.
work
Well,
daily? Okay.
yes, that I didn't work on that station, but
Okay.
I worked. The Department of Scientific and Industrial Research was the government organisation that ran the hop research program, and one of the neighbouring sister sites, a research station about 5 kilometres around the road, was one called the Tobacco Research Station, where I was based, and so I knew Rudy Roberg, not super well, but he retired in early 1970s, and
Right.
there was another person, Tony Frost, who took over from the program, and he ran
Right.
it till 1984, and that's when I took over. But this site here is now a rugby fields. Actually,
Rugby field. Oh,
yeah. The site was closed down in the late 1970s and shifted around to where the the tobacco research station was, and some more land was acquired to grow a range of different crops. So if you wind your clock back to that time, it was the tobacco industry was going down the tubes, downhill,
right.
and even the hop program wasn't a big program at all. It was not as it was a as I said, it was emerging from a cottage industry, and the product was good, but there were other crops in the area which were becoming much more important, if you like, for horticulture, and they were the apples and kiwi fruit industries, which are still around today. They're the biggest industries around the Nelson area still. And but as you know, with the hop program, it's expanded. It's quite big now, and
Right.
it's quadrupled in size since 2017. So that's resurged, if you like, and hopefully that's mainly because of the cultivars we grow and the good export markets they developed. So this site here was, I'm very familiar with that site. As I said, I've played a lot of rugby. I'm a rugby player from way back, and
Oh,
I don't play rugby anymore, of course, but
anymore, yeah.
it's well past my use by date in terms of playing rugby. But that's right, I played rugby on that ground there. So a bit earlier
That's
in my career.
awesome. Yeah,
Mm.
and like what you mentioned, you've met Dr. Rudy before, but not that well, right? Because he was retiring like probably 20 years before your time.
Yeah, and he was a great man. He was a very good scientist and did a lot of the pioneering work, I guess you could say, for setting
Yeah.
the program up. And there was one other person that started just before him, and they imported a lot of hop material into New Zealand, which was used in the breeding program since. So I've benefited from it, and also, of course, since Dr. Roberg retired, I've imported quite a lot of material myself as well.
Yeah.
So that's really the backbone. If you're going to have a plant breeding program in any crop, you've got to have the basic genetic resources to create new
To work with
hybrids
it.
from them. So that's where it was. Dr. Roberg was he was he was interned in by the Japanese in the Second World War, and his family. He was based out in where I'm not too sure exactly where it was, Southeast Asia somewhere anyway, and he was interned during the Second World War, and he made it made it back to his homeland is the Netherlands, and but when he got there, he wanted to immigrate to New Zealand, so he came out and the job was offered to him. And he spent quite a lot of time going overseas and, as I said, looking at germplasm collections from around the world, particularly at Y College in the UK. It's one of the homes, if you like, of plant breeding in hops. So he went there and spent some time. He got hold of the triploid hops, or the from that visit to the UK, and then sort of made it work in New Zealand as a tool, if you like, in the breeding program. But we can talk
Right.
about that in a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Dr. Robig he's a fine man. He's still got a lot of descendants around here. He's had a large family, and he some of his grandchildren and children are still around the area now. So yeah, none of them, from what my knowledge, none of them went into science. But he unfortunately he died quite soon after he retired, which is a tragedy.
Yeah,
And
tragic.
his wife, I believe, is about 100 years old now. I think she's still alive, so I haven't checked up in the last few months. But I believe the last time I did check up, she was alive and in a
Bless her.
retirement home in Nelson. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, for our listener, Dr. Rudy is the first director of hop research station in Riwaga, and if you come across the hops that's named Dr. Rudy, that's named after him.
Correct.
Yeah,
That's right.
from
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was the cultivar was originally called Robura Super Alpha, and
oh, okay.
that again it was shortened in the early 2000s to Dr. Rudy, because that was a tribute to Dr. Rudy, who was the pioneer of the hop research program here in New Zealand. So I owe him a lot of in terms of my career as well, because he set the basis up for
Yeah.
what I've continued on with.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, let's move on to the storyline.
Sure.
All right. I mean, next, if you ever tasted a beer brewed with New Zealand hops before, you would recognize the unique characteristic of the hops that impart from this land, like bright gooseberry, Sauvignon Blanc wine character, some passion fruit quality, or pineapple tropical that's pretty straightforward and stand out, or some of the pungent diesel like aroma. Now, I do not believe that this emergence of unique flavors and aroma occurs without a single reason. And one of the main contributing factors, definitely has something to do with the growing location or area of the plants, or the so-called terroir. Because even the same hop variety that are grown in different area, like for example, there is a research from OSU, the Oregon State of University. They proved that the Cascade hop that grown in Oregon area were different from Washington's Cascade in both analytical and tasting aspect. So to this point, Dr. Ron, can you walk us through the major environmental factors and its associated effects in the growing of hops in New Zealand that could possibly contribute to the unique characteristic of them?
Yeah. I'll try to answer that succinctly.
Yeah.
It's I think we talked about some of them already. High sunshine hours, mild climate. There's lack of predators and lack of pests. Sorry, and alluvial silt soils, even rainfall. UV is a big thing, I believe. Although it's sort of anecdotal, I believe that certainly they believe in the terroir of grapes in the Marlborough province, which is a neighbouring province of ours. It's a major area of Sauvignon Blanc production in the world, in fact, now. And they feel that it's the UV factor is certainly contributes to those unique flavours. So UV would be one. I think the other terroir thing. It's been quite a common thing mentioned in recent times about Cascade, for instance, which does grow. Cascade does grow well in New Zealand, by the way, and it's a diploid cultivar, which most of ours are not diploids; they're seedless triploids. But you can grow Cascades quite successfully here in New Zealand, and they produce well. And a lot of people have said, and the aroma is not anywhere near like the aroma of Cascade produced in the United States, Oregon or Washington. And that's fair enough. It's probably there's some truth in that. But I always point out that it doesn't matter what you do, you're always going to have hops that are 6 months difference in age.
Yeah.
So like for instance, at this time of year, our hops have just been harvested, so they'll smell and taste difference in beer probably than The Cascade developed in the US, which is sort of, obviously about 9 months ago. So there's always that factor. I think probably the main factors that terroir is obviously important. You're correct. And we are doing studies on that, by the way, in New Zealand here. We've got hops growing down in central Otago, down in the bottom of the South Island, about 45 south of the equator. As I said, we're about 41 here in Motueka. So quite a substantial difference, and it's also a much more continental climate down there. It's quite dry and a bit more like what you'd find in more extremes of temperatures in winter and summer, a bit more like what you find in the Pacific Northwest, particularly in Yakima Valley. And so, yeah, there are factors, and I'm not a chemist, so there's probably lots of chemistry information that could be form some very important studies that would answer some of those questions about the terroir. I think it's partly terroir, but I think, to be quite honest with you, I think it's mostly genetics, and that seems to be the main differences to me about our hops. Okay, Cascade would be a terroir thing, but because genetically they're the same. That's the same clone that they grow up there as what we grow here in New Zealand. So there's kilning. There's lots of factors to be taken into consideration when you're looking at terroir, of course, and not only soils and the climate, but also how the hops are dried and how they're processed from that as well. So they're probably not too different than what they do up in the United States anyway, and regarding that, there's roughly the same temperatures that they're dried at and roughly the same processing as well. But yeah, I mean, in terms of our cultivars, I think it's genetics really. One thing that we think, well, I'm sorry, I should say I know, is that our hops we've followed a different path in our breeding program than most other countries in terms of not only the triploid production and producing hops of seedless triploids, but we've also used genetic material that is slightly different in terms of origin, if you like. For instance, California Lake Cluster, I don't think has been a major hop that's been grown or used in breeding programs elsewhere in the world. Maybe it has a little bit, but it's we've pretty much used that as the basis of a lot of our differences that we think is relevant to New Zealand hop production. One thing that California Lake Cluster is, or it's just generally called Lake Cluster, and cluster hops in general. There's some doubt about its original origin, if you like. Not origin, not just original origin. So it's it looks like it has some sort of wild genetics in there as well as European genetics in its background. So there's some question about its origin. I don't believe it's been resolved yet where it came from. So we assume that it's got a lot of wild North American genetics in it as well, because hops are a native of North America as well as Europe, and if you go in certain places in the US, you can find various subspecies of hops grown in the eastern side of the Rockies, and also right over to the Canadian Maritime area, right across the plains. There's some different three different subspecies of hops that are grown wild, if you like, and there's been collections made of them. Those, and also with the movement west of hops in general in the United States, there's probably a good story there that could be told in future by some bright student who could do some research on it, and there has been work done on some of that genetic background. So there's a likely story there that I think a lot of our differences have come about because our pathway has been slightly different. Most of the European material has been derived from Brewer's Gold and Northern Brewer, and if you look back in their parentage, they've used a lot of North American genetics as well. And one of the parents of British Gold was a North American wild type, and crossed to an old European
Cultivar.
UK cultivar, and so there is. So we've Fuggle is probably the main one that comes from Europe that we've used mostly in our breeding program here too. So, but obviously, we're talking lots of generations now, and a lot of our material has been derived from that, and we've added to it. So we've, if you like, we've made a nice big soup of all these different types of hops, and had a bit of or the other analogy is, lolly scramble, and so we've mixed it up, and I think that's a good thing about plant breeding is you can mix things up, and you can really create some new genetics, if you like, new pathways to developing new cultivars.
Right, gotcha. And
was that succinct enough? I think it went on a bit too long, but never mind.
Oh no, that's all right. Because when we talk about the environmental effect, the factors, the point that you sum up probably going to be the high UV concentration over New Zealand, right? And that's probably because of, I don't know, maybe the depleted ozone layer, the clear air pollution that you guys have, and that kind of has some interaction or some play with how the plant behave, and that might probably, has some of this chemical interaction on the way that they grow up. And
correct. Yeah. No, you did right. And that's probably the main factor. I believe that UV, apart from genetics, UV would be the big differences. I mean, and we do get very clear skies here. So there's no secret that New Zealand as a country has got the highest rate of it's not something we're very proud of, but cancer rates, skin cancer is very high in New Zealand, and I think it's because a lot of us live outdoors, of course, and work outside, but it's also the factor is that there's very clear skies, and we've, as you know, with over the last 4 or 5 decades, there's been a massive hole over Antarctica with the UV at certain times of the year as well. So.
And seems like the second one is like the low pest situation and low disease, right? And is that because of the way the geographic of Nelson area is, the climates and the humidity that's kind of restrict the activity of all those pests? Do you have any?
No, the pests are just not here. We don't have the powdery and downy mildew strains here in Narpit that they have in North America and Europe. No, we don't have the hop aphid, the damson hop aphid. We don't have it here in New Zealand, and long may that last, because that's a real threat to our industry if we get any of those diseases in New Zealand. I mean, we do have powdery mildew, we do have downy mildews, but they're not of the strains that affect the hops. So other crops get them, but not hops. So, and I believe some of those, powdery mildew, for instance, is an obligate parasite. So it has to come in. If it was introduced into New Zealand, it would come in on somebody's clothing, or somebody had a plant illegally tucked into their suitcase or whatever, and deliberately introduced here. So we're very conscious of quarantine issues in New Zealand. If anybody that's listening has been into New Zealand, well, they'll know what I'm talking about, because you usually put through the 3rd degree when you arrive in New Zealand, and it's for a good reason, because we're an isolated country. We don't have a lot of the pest and diseases and a whole range of different crops that other countries have, and so we're just trying to protect ourselves, I guess. And so the other thing, it does create problems for us, though. Look in the future, looking towards future-proofing ourselves. If we did have these diseases and pests come into New Zealand, we need to be aware of them and start doing some work on it. And one of the good ways of doing that is by molecular means. So we don't actually have to introduce the disease into New Zealand, but we can do some screening for it here. So that's one way that we're looking at.
Yeah, Got it. And all this kind of environmental factor is probably have to thank to the mother of nature, and that's the thing that you guys are protecting and keep it prolonged as long as it can be.
Yeah, and the other good thing about, of course, the differences. We talk about the differences is that because we don't have to spray, it means
Hmm.
that people using our hops won't have the same possibilities of having
Yeah.
pesticide residues in their hop. When they're using it in their brewing process, particularly if you're using it late in the brewing process.
Hmm.
I think that's probably a positive thing.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. So we mentioned about the environmental factors, which we have, I would say, lesser control over it. Now let's look at the other aspect. That probably Dr. Ron has mentioned quite a bit about it, that probably lead to the enigmatic attributes of New Zealand hops. But this time we gain more control over it. When I read about New Zealand hops, go through the description, I often come across the word triploid in it, and I don't really recall seeing this word mentioned in the description from other hops growing region. It may exist, but I deduce that the triploid is a thing that plays a significant role in how New Zealand hops become the New Zealand hops that we now know today. So, Dr. Ron, before we talk about triploid's hop, can you enlighten us about diploidy and the creation of triploid first in a nutshell? You know, I,
Hmm.
I I understand that it has something to do with genetics and chromosomes, but that part of my brain is gone. So hopefully you can revive it.
Yeah,
Let's
I
move
can't
on.
blame I can't blame you. It's a pretty boring topic if you're not interested in genetics. So the
Okay.
yeah, triploids are basically plants with three sets of chromosomes.
Okay.
The normal plants, as you've got on this diagram here, they're diploids. So two sets of chromosomes, two chromosomes of each. Of whatever numbers of chromosomes they've got. In
Yeah.
hops, the diploid number of chromosomes is 20, so 10 pairs of two, if you like. And to create a triploid, you have to obviously produce something that's double the chromosome number as well. So what we've done in our breeding program, and thanks to the pioneering work that has been done at Y College originally in the 1940s, and also picked up by Dr. Roberg when he was over there visiting, and started developing these here in New Zealand, is that you've got to develop what we call a tetraploid, so one that's doubled the chromosome numbers of the diploid.
Hmm.
And you can do that by usually it's artificial means. You add a specific chemical to it, and the plant, if you try hard enough anyway, you eventually produce these tetraploid plants. It's not
Okay.
easy, and it's not straightforward, and most countries have avoided it because it's what's the point, basically.
Hmm.
So what we've done here in New Zealand is a little bit different because the triploids are genetically seedless. So when you think of a triploid, it's a hybrid plant between a tetraploid parent and a diploid parent. So you've got one that's got two sets of chromosomes, one that's four sets of chromosomes. The progeny's got three sets. So that's roughly the summary, if you like, of the plant. The other thing
Yeah.
about hops is that they are dioecious plants. So dioecious means that there's male and female plants are separated on different plants, but
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
sex is separated on
Yeah.
different plants. So you have one or the other, boys or girls, not both.
Yeah.
So when you create tetraploids, it could be either a male, as you've got in this diagram, or as a female. And
Okay.
there's various ways you can do that, and we won't bore the audience here with too much of the genetics. But basically, what the idea of the triploid is that you can't divide three. So I think that's
Okay.
even with a person with a modicum of knowledge about dividing numbers
Yeah.
knows that you can't divide three. So it ends up being they don't set seeds. When they're hybridized on the triploid level, the plant can't divide itself properly. So that's the whole idea of it. And you've got the diagram up there of seedless watermelons, bananas, obviously, and there's also other some of the citrus fruits as well. And that's it's quite a common way of producing seedlessness, which can be desirable. It's in hops. In some ways, it's a dead end because you can't use those triploids easily to produce another generation of plants for crossing. So you can't use them as parents very easily. You can with certain techniques, but it's not common. So basically, you've got you produce the triploids. That's the end of the breeding cycle for those. So if you want to produce any new types, you've got to go back to either the diploid parents or the tetraploid parents. And the cornerstone of the hop program in New Zealand has been the development of the tetraploids. Initially it was quite limited, but we've now got probably the world's best collection of tetraploid material in hops, and which we guard very cautiously. And it's you can, as I said, you can have plants that are either male or female at that level. And it's the cornerstone of our breeding program, and it remains that way today, and probably will be going forward. And you can also appreciate that when you're doing the doubling the chromosome numbers and crossing it with the diploid, you end up with a lot of the triploids. There's quite a diverse range of triploids, so that's one of the ways of creating diversity, if you like, in our program is to have this, producing triploid plants. And yeah, as I said, we've put a lot of emphasis in the last 3 decades on the production of tetraploids, and we believe we've got a good collection now, which we're very proud of. And we, as I said, we guard it with our lives, if you like. It's a unique set of material. Was that did that answer the question? No, I think it hopefully did anyway. And
yes,
yeah, okay.
Just curious, like, what are some of the benefit of breeding a triploid plant in general, or we can just focus on hops, besides from being seedless because they are sterile, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just going back a little bit, Narpat, the most countries that grow hops, they basically what they do is they have diploid female plants that are grown commercially, and they obtain seedlessness by removing as many males as they can possibly get from the commercial growing areas, like, for instance, the Pacific Northwest. But even up there, you'll find that hops have got seeds in them, so there's obviously stray males around the place. So it's, I guess, the triploid's just another way of just getting as little seed as you can possibly get in a population. So when we say seedlessness, it's usually less than 2% of the cone's weight. So that is seed. And a lot of those in triploids, for instance, you'll have the odd seed in there, but what it is it's usually empty. It's empty casing because, as I said, you can't divide. You can't divide 3. So it's it's just one of those things where I think. Yeah, I'm not too sure whether that answers the story with you about your question now, but it's just a way of us. The differences are the fact that we've got a unique germplasm resource, if you like, and the triploids suit our climate. We've got a mild climate here, so we can grow them quite happily into the autumn. Whereas most other countries would struggle because you run out of season. They start getting quite cold by the time it gets into, say, for instance, the Northern Hemisphere, it gets into late September, early October. It's getting quite cold in some areas. So our climate would suggest that it's you could happily grow hops into that time. So it's hybrid vigor is the other thing. We think that the triploid delays flowering or delays ripeness, I should say, not flowering, but it delays ripeness. So that's another factor that is unique about them. And it's not an easy technique, as I said. It's most countries have avoided going
Yeah.
to triploids. There's been the odd cultivar released in Slovenia, for instance. They have some commercial cultivars are triploids. There's been a couple in the United States as well. Some of the aroma ones, Willamette and Mount Hood are triploids, and
Right.
so it's not unique, what we've done here, and we're not claiming that we've invented seedless triploids, but we've pioneered the process, if you like. As I said, the UK, the breeder there in the 1940s developed these the triploid technique, if you like, or the producing tetraploids, which is the cornerstone of producing triploids.
Right, and thus being the triploid translate to a better yield, or play some contribution to the higher oil content for the hops.
Yes. And again, without boring everybody with genetics, I mean, basically, when you've got a triploid, you've got two sets of chromosomes from one parent and one set from the other parent,
Right.
from your diagram that you had up there before at NARPAT. So, so depending on which way you do the cross, if you have the tetraploid as the female, which is the most common, you'll get two sets of chromosomes from that female and one set from the male parent. So, so there is hybrid vigor. Yes, it's we do tend to see some robust seedlings coming through in the triploids, but it's mainly the fact that you've weighted the program towards producing good plants by depending whether you've used the parent that's been doubled in chromosome number as the female or the male.
Yeah.
We've tended to use both, but and for various reasons. But for instance, the latest cultivar Superdelic was produced by crossing a diploid female with a tetraploid male. So that's give you an example. Whereas something like Nectaron was produced the other way. It was produced by producing a tetraploid seedling female with a seedling diploid male, and the progeny from that obviously is triploids from both in both cases, but different way of producing the end result. So it's it's been a lot of fun. As you can see, I'm a bit of a science geek, so I can it's been good for me to be able to fiddle around and do things that other people have not really tried very much in breeding programs, and happily I can say that we've produced some good cultivars.
Yeah, 100%. I would agree that. And just to be clear here, these factors, the environmental factors and the breeding attempts, triploids, probably is the main thing that we are focusing on this session today. But it is not the absolute answer, because like what Dr. Ron has mentioned, there's more to discover, more to learn, and more to explore, to find out. But we all know that the hop that is grown in these regions, in New Zealand, has that terroir, high UV, low pest, soil content that play harmoniously well, with the breeding of diploid hops that lead to this emergence of enigmatic hops attributes from this land. And I think that, to close this session, we best should talk about the breeding of some of the impactful hops from this region that Dr. Ron and his team has his hands on. And I'm eager to hear, a brief, quick story, as well as the concept of the breeding of each variety. So, Dr. Ron, I think I'm going to pull up one last photo, and we go through them together, one by one, from left to right.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Oh, there you are. That's our rock stars right on the screen there. Well done, NARPAT. You've hit the nail on the head with all those cultivars. They're becoming quite well known internationally now, of course. And we've, as you can see by the this montage here, we've tried to give every one of those cultivars an identity. They're individuals, so we don't want the packaging and et cetera to all look the same. So those the fonts that are used at the top are what we've created recently, and giving them all an image and a identity of their own. And also what they've been used for as well. Nelson Sauvin. Now, Nelson Sauvin, and to give you an idea, Nelson Sauvin and Rewalker were crossed in my second year of being a plant breeder in hops. And so in 1985, they were hybridized that year. And by 1987, we started to, we actually selected Nelson Sauvin and Rewalker in those years. And I can remember back to the plants, even now I can, with my fading memory, but I can remember Rewalker in particular was quite unique because of its, it was a very oily plant in terms of its cone development, and it was just quite unique looking as well. It's never been a high yielder, but it's been quite unique in terms of its chemistry, and also its brewing properties are outstanding, as you will know. So Nelson Sauvin was it was developed in 1985, along with Walker. Nelson Sauvin was released in 2000 as a commercial product. At that stage, Rewalker and Motueka were released already. They were released in the late 1990s, and as you can see, 97 and 96 were the times they were released. Dates where they were released, sorry, and they were renamed in 2007 as respectively Rewalker and Motueka from D's Arts and B's Arts. So those cultivars were derived from obviously the Sarts cultivar from the Czech Republic, and that's when I say they were derived from it. There was 2 generations previously where they were derived from, so it's not directly from Sarts, so it's from its grandmother, and those 3 cultivars have been I guess our rock stars up until the release of Nectaron and Superdelic. So they Nelson Sauvin was interesting when it was being trialled. Obviously, it was crossed in 85, released in 2000, but that's a pretty big gap. It's 15 years, and it was well before its time. You think back to those times, and the craft brewing industry internationally was virtually nothing. There might have been a little bit of the odd brewery in the United States and elsewhere. They're starting to form, but by 2000, they certainly was. The craft brewing boom had started, and obviously it's carried on considerably since then. But so Nelson Sauvin was a hop that was grown originally by Lion Breweries here in New Zealand, or not grown, sorry. They developed it in terms of its use in beer, and Lion Breweries were one of our main supporters of the hop breeding program at the time, and still are, in fact. And so they pioneered the use of Nelson Sauvin in beers, and they at that time they had purchased one of the few craft brewing brewers in New Zealand at that time. Was a little brewery in Nelson called Mac Brewing, and Max and they produced a beer called at the time when it was renamed. They named the beer the Aramac. And Aramac was the original beer that was produced with Nelson Sauvin hops. And so Max Brewery in Nelson was the one which, as I said, at that stage that had been taken over by Lion, and they pioneered the commercialization, if you like, of Nelson Sauvin in New Zealand. That was, and it quickly spread to other countries, including Australia, and further afield in the early 2000s into the US. One of the pioneering brewers over there to use Nelson Sauvin was Alpine and Brewery in
San Diego.
San Diego. That's right. Which doesn't exist anymore, but it's its derivative has existed. In the same family, and McElhinney, and so they pioneered the use of Nelson Sauvin and spread the good word, if you like, about Nelson Sauvin. So Lion Breweries and other breweries like Alpine are the ones that we owe a lot to in terms of production. Nelson it's a really unique hop, as we all know. It's got it's got lots of fruity essences to it, that's for sure. And but its main claim to fame is that when you use it in most breweries, that use it. You've got that that passion fruit, also that winey, those white wine flavors is coming through quite importantly, and so that's its claim to fame. I don't think it's ever been. And people have tried to replicate the flavor of Nelson Sauvin, but I don't believe that Nelson will ever be replaced in terms of that's uniqueness. Rewalker's another one. It's a harder one to grow, and it's got a very strong citrus flavors in particular, and other flavors as well, some tropical fruits. So that one's been, it was, as I said, released in 1997, and about the same time Motueka was released. That one again, it's a Sartza-derived selection. The reason for renaming them, I might add, is that it's a bit confusing for people. If they were originally called, Rewalk was originally called D's-Arts, and the other one was called, Motueka was called B's-Arts, and D's-Arts stands for Dominion Breweries, who did the pioneering work. They're another brewery here in New Zealand, and they produced a beer of outstanding qualities in the late 1990s, and it was known as D's-Arts for the next decade, pretty much. And then it's actually quite difficult when you explain the names of them as B's-Arts or D's-Arts, because it doesn't translate well with the Europeans, who think that they should all have the profiles, if you like, of the Sart's grandparent. And of course they don't, and we've never claimed to have them. But it's been a real godsend when we've started renaming them Rewalker and Motueka, because that it's easy to explain that. And you can say, oh, they're Sart's triploids, but if you have it around the other way, with Sart's as the main name, it's a bit tricky. So, and no, I think it's a good thing for us. We don't want to be, using their names in our development of our cultivars anyway. More recently, we've had a lot of emphasis on our program in the last 2 decades on sort of big themes, if you like. And one of the things.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just curious that the breeding of Nelson, Rewalker, and Motueka. What was the concept back then? Like, were you guys focusing on to produce a higher alpha hops, or you guys are playing with trying to come up with a unique characteristic hop at that time?
Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't really explained that, but thanks for reminding me. In particular, we had 2 phases of our program. One was to produce high alpha types, and the other one was to produce aroma types. That's the classic breeding of hops, is aroma or alpha. But I feel that with our program, we could, and like the American programs of today as well, I think you could call them New World hops. Because Nelson Sauvin while it was originally crossed with his mother, for instance, is Smoothcone, which is one of the original cultivars produced in New Zealand. And that was derived from Lake Cluster. And I like to use the term New World hops, and because they're not classic aroma hops of, say, European extraction, and you can't call them that, and we don't want to be them to be called that, because that's really not what we're trying to achieve. What we're trying to achieve is something that's unique, and it's something that's from a New Zealand perspective. So Nelson Sauvin it's a moderately high alpha hop. It's up around 12%, sometimes a bit more than that. Rewalker and Motueka are low alpha hops. I guess you could classify them as aroma hops. And because of their genetic background, certainly their original intention was to produce an aroma hop, if you like, from New Zealand. And we've sometimes called them aroma hops, and they've been used in various parts of the world as in brews produce nice lager type beers or Pilsner type beers. But I think the key to Rewalker and Motueka now is you could say they're New World hops, just like Nelson Sauvin is, and I like to use that term. If you look at the craft brewing scene around the world now, they don't talk much about alphas and aromas anymore. They talk about beers that have been using hops from the hot side or the cold side, or Whirlpool or whatever hopbacks or dry hopping, those sort of scenes. They don't talk so much about alpha and beta acids anymore, and the oil content is not talked about in quite the same vein as it was back in the 1990s and before. So and a lot of the compounds that we produce, we still don't know what some of those compounds are that are giving the unique flavors. You know, the thiol-based compounds probably, and some of them are obviously Nelson-Sauvin has been quite a lot of research done on that. But it's and they give certain specific thiol compounds, if you like. But I think the uniqueness of them is their individual flavors, and particularly, as I said, Nelson-Sauvin with its white wine characters. Motueka, for instance, is very strong on mojito lime, and Rawalker is a bit more sort of passion fruit, I guess you could say grapefruit citrusy flavors to it. Moving on to that, though, in more recent times, of course, Nectaron Superdelic on the right-hand side of this diagram here is we had these big themes, like we wanted to produce hops that were high in alpha. We wanted to produce hops that what we called noble aroma or perfect gift type flavors, and the other one was the golden fleece, as we called it. And the golden fleece is sort of related to the Greek mythology around Jason the Argonauts, with trying and searching for the golden fleece as sort of the unobtainable hop that has got good growing properties, good brewing properties, and everybody loves it, and everybody's happy with it. So probably the cultivar that comes closest to the golden fleece, if you like, for us is Nectaron. Now, Nectaron's sister is Waimea, and that was released in 2012. Nectaron was, as I said, it was a sister to it. It was actually produced and selected in 2006, and along with Waimea. And it took a bit longer to produce, mainly because it was a hop that it didn't have the outstanding alphas that Waimea has got. Waimea's got around about 16% alphas in its, and that was what the industry was wanting us to produce. So we did, and it was a good hop, no doubt about it. It still is a good hop. It's a beautiful hop to use. Probably underrated in many ways, as both an aroma hop and also an alpha hop for using on many different. It's quite versatile in terms of its use. But Nectaron was there, and in 2013-14 we obtained a little pilot brewing plant, and for our research program, and we started doing some brewing with some of the advanced selections that we had our eye on. And one of those happened to be Nectaron. And one of the first beers that we produced from this pilot brewing plant was, as it turned out, was Nectaron. And it stood out. And everybody was really taken with the flavor and aroma of it. And a lot of people would describe it as they would just taste the beer and they'd say, wow. And so it got the nickname Wow for quite a few years until we commercialized it as Nectaron. But and it was released in 2020, as we said. Crossed in 2004 and released 2020, and it went into commerce around 2015-16. I think the first commercial crop was 2016. The first commercial beer that was produced was one that was brewed up in Rotorua in the North Island by a little brewery up there called Crouch's Brewing, and the brewer there had took it up, and he loved it, and so that was the first commercial brew, and it quickly spread after that, and as we know, it's sort of taken off around the globe now. And finally, Superdelic, if we can talk about that. I don't know if we've got enough time. The Superdelic is a hop that sort of come through. It's got a lot more berry flavors. We wanted to produce something that's a little bit different, so that's the commercialization of Superdelic was released last year, and it came through the process a bit quicker. It was crossed in 2012, and we identified it straight away as being something that was different. And by that stage, we'd started to, by 2014, we had this little pilot brewing plant. So we stuck it into some brews early on, and lo and behold, it stood out as a hop that was quite different in terms of its aromas and flavors. So we're Yeah, that was fast tracked. As you can see, the dates, about 10 years, 11 years to
Yeah.
commercial release. But it was produced in, by 2018, it was in commercial production. So it was quite quick. When I say commercial production, it was a limited field trials. One of the programs, the points about our program is that we feel like it's quite unique, is we've got this thing called the BRACT brewing program. And BRACT brewing is a whole series of brewers and growers from around the growers from New Zealand and brewers from around the globe, who are selected because they've used New Zealand hops or are keen to trial new hops for us. They put these trial selections into their limited
Trial.
release beers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to cut a long story short, the BRAC program is what we use as our pathway to market for our new selections. And both Nectaron and Superdelic were forerunners to that. Their release was through the BRAC program. And so that's really where we've, how we commercialize I think it's a good process, which other countries have taken up on as well. And they call it something different in the US, of course. But the BRAC program is what we've marketed our trial hop program in terms of commercialization.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
How's that?
And yeah, it's awesome to hear the stories. I mean, the brief one for each varieties. And out of this 5, I've never used Superdelic before. Not sure whether I tasted, but we'll try to find some. And if we look at the spider graph, like what you said, like these are the 5 rock star of currently New Zealand hop that is well known into the brewing and beer consumer worlds. And the spider graph kind of tells that each of them has a unique characteristic, and you can kind of I would say select or play around each of them and fine tune your brewing to the way that you like. It seems like these hops came through a well thought process of how you want to position them at the end of the way it's going to be commercialized. Because it's not like, okay, you're going to replace Nelson with Motueka, or you're going to replace Nectaron with Riwaga. It's kind of in a different scheme, as from my point of view.
Yep, I think I think of the cultivars, Nectaron's probably got the most versatility. It can be used on the hot side or the cold side, and dry hopped in particular, and it plays well with other hops. We're not saying that we've got the unique characteristics for every brew. So like the Nectaron is often used in America alongside their cultivars, the main cultivars up there, Citra, Simcoe, and Mosaic. So Nectaron is blends well, if you like, or plays well with those other cultivars. So on our recent trip up there, a lot of the breweries were using both American hops and New Zealand hops in their brews. One thing we've noticed with Superdelic is it's sold out this year, for instance, to give you an idea, and it's got berry flavors to it. It's quite strong in those sweet berry flavors, and when you use it in the beer. Nectaron's probably got more, it's got more tropical flavors and stone fruit and passion fruit flavors to it, and definitely got apricot-y flavors to it, and peach as well. But it's a hop, I think, that's going to be the cornerstone of the New Zealand production for probably the next decade. That's what Nectaron, I'm saying. And I would like to think that it's going to continue to grow and be produced in greater quantities as time goes on. It's a tough world out there at the moment with hop production, as you well know. It's with the pandemic and downturn in major economies, there's pullback from a lot of craft brewers now using, a lot more money conscious, if you like, I suppose you could call it. And the bank managers are sort of taking a bit more note of them, how they're doing. And so I think it's a tough world. And, I think there's a great place for New Zealand hops in general, offshore and also in New Zealand as well. But I'd like to think that these 5 cultivars we've got up on the screen are going to be the backbone of our production for a long time to come, and in particular Nectaron and Superdelic. I think have got a great future. Being very recent hops, it's most brewers only just learning how to grow it and use it in their brewing process right at this moment. And the growers are still learning a lot about Nectaron, for instance, how to grow it properly as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hop that's I think it's got a lot of potential. As it says, the catchphrase is "science meets art." That's
Yes.
that's what we think of it.
That's a good phrase. And Dr. Ron, the out of these five cultivars, five varieties, which one that is dominating the field the most in New Zealand?
At the moment,
Yeah.
production wise, well, there's three big ones. Nelson Sauvin, Motueka, and Nectaron are the ones that are being produced in the greatest quantities at the moment. Rewalker is not so easy to grow, but it's that's sort of in the second rank, and Superdelic is on the rise. As I said,
Correct.
it's a lot of the issues with hop production worldwide is that you can kill the golden goose, so to speak, by producing too much. So I think that's the important thing is to make sure that the regulation of the industry is managed properly. You can see that what's happened in the United States, for instance, with the massive increase in hop production over there, they've in some ways it's been a bit detrimental in terms of the expansion of the industry because they've overproduced a lot of material, and the prices drop for the hops, becomes more difficult to produce, and it has that cycle of boom and bust cycle. And it's not only the United States; it's other places. I'm not just accusing them of it, but it's I think our hops, if we're trying to occupy a different spot than other people on the world hop scene. We don't want to be copying what the United States does, and we don't want to be producing hops that the Germans or other countries produce. We want to be producing our own and marketing our own hops for their own great attributes. And I'd like to think we've achieved that. This is not the end of the story, of course. This is with the BRAC program. We've got we've got two really promising selections coming through now, which I won't talk about because they're just numbers. And but we've got plant variety rights in place with those cultivars now too. The program we've developed here in New Zealand it's a joint program between the New Zealand Hops Growers Cooperative, which is 27 farmers. There are other marketing groups in New Zealand as well, but that's the in New Zealand Hops Cooperative produce well over half of the hops that are grown in New Zealand, and we formed a joint breeding program with Plant and Food Research, my old parent company that I used to work for up until end of 2021. So there's a joint breeding program between the two, and that's where the BRAC program, BRAC brewing program fits in. So it's a joint program, and it's funded by both sources. So I think that's the pathway to market is so important, and innovation of the pipeline is very important going forward. So we'd like to think there's more Nectarons and Superdelics to come in the near future.
Yeah, we look forward for that. And all right, I mean, Dr. Ron, I think we've way over an hour mark, and I feel like I'm so bothered with your time over there. So just to say, do you have any final thoughts about this topic that we are discussing?
I'd like to think that New Zealand's going to have an important part to play in hop production going forward. We're an isolated country, but we've found a pathway to market, if you like, with our hops being unique. I would like to think that New Zealand's going to play a major role in hop development in the future. And my successor at Plant and Food Research is Kerry Templeton, and he's doing a great job out there at the moment. So I think the program's in good hands, and I'd like to think that the co-op is going to be the leading marketing organisation in hop production here in New Zealand, and because of the innovation pipeline, I think it's an important partnership with Plant and Food to produce new hops. So my final word is probably here's to hops.
That's awesome. It's awesome. So before we end this session, I have one quick question for you. besides from New Zealand hops, what are your favorite hops in beer?
Apart from New Zealand ones,
Yeah.
Oh gosh, probably I would say Mosaic would be one.
Okay.
The American hop cultivar Mosaic is one that's very well known. That would probably be the one that stands out to me as being quite unique. There's another one called come out of the Oregon breeding program effort as Strata. It's another one.
Okay.
And dare I say it, Citra. The big ones. I don't. We have them here in New Zealand in beers, but yeah, of course I'm a bit biased. I think hops produced from the cooperative are the very best. So you can produce some really good beers with them.
Right. Understood. Okay, great. And I think it is where we will end this session. So, Dr. Ron, thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate it. All the stories and the knowledge, especially in the triploid genetic side that you share, is highly regarded. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. No, it's been a pleasure, and thank you, Narpit, for inviting me to give this talk. I hope some people haven't been completely blown away with the, being too bored and switched off. If they have, they won't be hearing this anyway. So, but no, that's it's been a pleasure and all the best for your the hop production. Sorry, the beer production up in Thailand. I think it's it's good to see the story being reaching into Thailand, and it's all power to it.
Yeah, of course. And I hope that I'll be able to shake hand with you physically in New Zealand someday in future, and probably walk the hop field over there in Nelson or Monterey area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's all the best. I think you won't be disappointed. The aromas of some of our hops are outstanding, and particularly 2024 was a brilliant season in terms of aromas. For whatever reason, perhaps the high sunshine hours, UV maybe, the hop aromas were outstanding this year. So we're very happy with the product.
Okay, got it. All right, so it is. I have to say goodbye now. Thank you, Dr. Ron. Take care.
Okay, all the best. Cheers.
Yeah,
bye.
Cheers. Bye. All right. We went through all the stories about the enigmatic attributes of the hops from the region we all know as New Zealand. Well, if you listener out there haven't have your hands or haven't had a chance to test the beers brewed with New Zealand hops, or has some contribution or some part of it of the hop bills that is New Zealand hops, I would encourage all of you to go and try some, and it's gonna open your minds, and it's gonna blow your mind in some case. And I'm not saying that it is a superior hop cultivars or hop products, but it is kind of in a unique area, unique realm. And you can look at it as, if you are a brewers, you're going to have more tools for your brewing thing to play around and explore and fine tune your beer, in my opinion. So I still remember the first time I had Nelson Sauvin hops, and it is kind of amazing. And that's kind of hit me into the brain, tinkering of how I'm gonna utilize it, how I'm gonna try to push my beer to the next level. And ever since I became a huge fan, a big fan of the hop cultivars from New Zealand, or the Southern Hemisphere, if I say in overall pictures. So yeah, I think that's it for today's session. We, the Good Burp Session, will be back in no time. So hopefully, until the next episode comes, go find some New Zealand hops beer and enjoy it. And until next time, stay tuned and cheers. Sawasdee krap.